Is Bev Kozelka, and she is the oldest sister. Now,
Well, so many things have been said that my long speech is short now, and that's fine, and we're running out of time, so that's fine. But I wanted to say, you know, that my dad was in the military, so we moved a lot, and there's 7 daughters. So we always were meeting new people, and my dad would say, "Here is Jane," and then he'd say, "Here is number 2, and number 3, and on down." So when we were very small, we weren't sure what our names were. Am I Kathy or am I number 4? And that's the way it was, all the way. Even when we were adults, he would introduce me sometimes as number 2. Dad, come on. Anyway, Jane was the oldest. She was our leader, and she took the responsibility of the oldest child seriously. And it just came naturally. And she was the one who would explain to us how to do things. She would show us how to do things. And she was the one we shared with. Good times we shared, and she was enthusiastic for us. And in the difficult times, she would share your worries. And she gave us our greatest gift, and that is to teach us to listen, because she would listen to us. And then she knew that she would call you back couple of days and say, you know, how are you doing? Find out how you were. And in these conversations, if you wanted advice, she would give it to you, and it would never be the fast answer, the easy answer. She always gave you the best advice she could. Now, when I say that, I speak as a sister. For Jeff, when we would visit, Jane gladly gave advice, especially when he didn't ask for it. Always, she was free with her advice there. And so the role of big sister came to Jane, and she took that responsibility. Now, just a few little things. Our parents were in us Catholic schools, and they were strict. I mean, they really were. You kind of got that impression. Jane was an entrepreneur from an early age. On one occasion, and this was a rarity, my parents left for the day. They were gone. And Jane said, "Let's make some money." And so we went and we pulled a table out from the house and we set it up in the driveway. We had a little cash box, and Jane said, "Anybody can sell lemonade." She said, "But we're going to sell sock dolls." And we did. Now, this was over 60 years ago. In my mind, our inventory was huge. We probably made 6, you know, and we were sitting on the table. But as every small business owner knows, the trouble is with the bureaucracy, and the bureaucracy came home early. My mother was furious. She was furious at everything. You know, you brought an indoor table outside, you blocked the driveway, you ruined every sock in the house, you cut up my ball of knitting yarn. But I have to say, that was a great day. And you see Jane's zest for organization and her business sense. I never forgot that. Just as Kathy never forgot the day she spent with Jane. A little later on, well, I have to say, as Ron said about, I think, science, and she was a wonderful scientist, but as a child, you might open the freezer, and there might be a bug in there, or a snowball left over for winter, or you'd walk around and you look down on the chair and there's something, you know, and you say, "Oh, Jane's been here." And she was a scientist from the beginning. Now, you've looked at the pictures, and as a teenager, Jane was beautiful. And she attracted a lot of attention. She really did. She had her admirers. And Jeff, cover your ears, because one day Jane was caught kissing a boy at our house. Now, as I said, my parents were very strict. And have you ever been in a situation where people are so angry that the whole house was quiet? It was tense because I mean, being grounded for I don't know how many years. But the reason I tell this story is that my sisters and I, we learned early on, if you're going to do something, do it quietly and don't get caught. Jane did not, it's not that she didn't learn that lesson, she didn't care about that lesson. If she was going to do something, she was going to do it out in the open, and if you didn't like it, that's fine with her. And that's how Jane was. Then later, of course, as an adult, I mean, whenever we talked to her, she was always telling us how proud she was of Jeff, what he had accomplished, what he was doing now, what he was going to do, the books he was working on. She always had kind words. Well, one time, she called you an asshole. I talked to her right after that. But other than that, he was wonderful. And then there was Matt. Matt, we knew was smart. Always, he was smart. And we had pictures of him. But when we would call, we'd ask, we'd say, Matt has your kind of stubbornness. Because we would always say, is Matt still playing basketball? And she said yes. He said, even with his sprained ankle, even with his shoulders, even with his knees, always. And are you still in that?
I now have children. Full-time sport in and of itself.
So then Matt married Kristen, made a wonderful family, and then the best thing in the world happened for Jane. She became a grandmother. And we didn't call her on weekends because we knew Hayden or Hunter might be over there. And she was busy passing on her knowledge to them about everything, trees, bugs, all that. So we tried not to interrupt. I guess to sum it up, I would say Jane was, of course, beautiful. She was smart, she was knowledgeable, and she was generous in every sense of the word. Generous with her time, with her resources, with her encouragement. And anything you can think of, you just call and ask Jane. And now, Val, you want to come on up?
See, Jeff, I am coming.
So, Jeff, maybe you come up here, and this is number 7. The baby. And
what Bev said about Jane calling me a name like that one time is complete nonsense. Complete nonsense. It was more like 100,000.
Okay, now Val had the great idea. The baby sister, she wanted to still have brains.
She left after wine.
She wanted to do something to help Jeff, to help everyone remember and memorialize Jane. So Val did this. I mean, she didn't make it. She walked.
I'm not artistic anyway.
But it is.
But we were looking, Jane loves butterflies. And so I came across this. It's 7 butterflies for the 7 sisters. So we hope that you will accept this for the Butterfly Center. And we did not high. Oh, sorry. And, as I was going through, trying to, with the butterflies, trying to think of something to say about Jane or memorial. Anyway, I came across this poem, and probably, I don't know if it's very familiar with all the butterfly people here, but it just caught my heart the moment I read it, and it's about Jane. A butterfly lights beside us like a sunbeam, and for a brief moment, its glory and beauty belong to our world, but then it flies on again, and although we wish it could have stayed, we are so thankful to have seen it at all.
Thank you. And this is the original one you got on eBay, right?
The one they didn't sell.
That's okay. Okay. Our next speaker is Frank Cano, who was Vice President of Literally Vaccines, if I have that right this time.
Thanks. Well, you know, we're all here to grieve Jane, but it's kind of nice to see that she trained 6 others to follow, and this world has them, so thank you very much. I'm going to have to double dip you here, because Alf Lindberg, who also worked with Jane for several years, asked me to read a speech that he prepared. Now, Alf, we recruited Alf in 1933, in the beginning of 1933, to be the head of our research. And he came from the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, and he was the chairman of the Nobel Committee on Medicine, selecting Nobel Prize winners every year. He did disappoint me and Ron. He never did pick us, but we kept hinting. It just didn't work. But, so these are the words of Alf. The headhunter recruiting me was the reader of this note, Francis Cano. So I was in safe hands for a couple of weeks. Then the bombshell hit me. Frank went looking for the Avalon Sun in California. With a smile, he severed the umbilical cord and went away. In comes Jane Scott, with her patience and understanding. Jane was equally good as a listener and a teacher. She guided me in the search for the right person or persons to contact. In this way, she facilitated my introduction to the business world and the literally praxis culture. I was very impressed by Jane's office. There were stacks of reprints and Xerox copies of scientific articles all over the floor and the walls. Jane was very honest. She hadn't read them all, and likely would not either. But Jane and I both hoped that passive diffusion would be an effortless way of staying on top of the science. But both of us knew that there was no shortcuts. Progress was only rewarded by hard, dedicated work. It was a privilege for me to have worked with Jane, and the memory bank is filled with pleasant recollections. Rest in peace, dear Jane. Now me. I was the person that hired Jane from the Rockefeller Institute, and we worked together for about 15 years. And when I said we worked together, as you now know, I basically worked for her. And then I left in '93, as you know, and went out to California. But I always maintained close relationships with Jane, and actually did see her about a year ago, for which we had, my wife Karen and I had lunch with her, and we consider ourselves blessed to have known her, and to have her as a good friend. And that's why we're here, because of our love and respect for her. I thought what I would do, since everybody has covered everything, is maybe just use her name for some ideas. So if you think about Jane, let's start with J. Okay, she had a Jaguar. That Jaguar meant so much to her. And somehow when she came over from Chappaqua, I don't know how she did it, but she always got the best parking spot. Okay, and had that car shining and showing off, and it was just always a delight. The second thing about Jane that, is the letter A. So when we talk about A, I'm sure you all know what we're going to mention. Alabama. Okay, so we had, right there, this wonderful woman from Alabama. Now, one of the things that Jane did after a couple of years was she gave me a bottle of wine that was actually made in Alabama. And I really wonder about that, especially when I see some of the background here. I see some, you'll see the Scotch or bourbon in the family, but she gave me a bottle of wine. So I was really very discreet. I buried it under all my Napa wines and thought I'd let it go. And Jane, in her nice style, would always come to me and say, "Did you have the wine yet?" So I finally capitulated, and we got together and shared the bottle of wine. And so what we agreed, but that was the best winery in Alabama. Now, what does N stand for? N stands for all the numerous meetings that we went to. And whenever Jane was there, you could always count on her to come up with new ideas for the challenges that we had to face. And she would never give up. What I really admired most about Jane, though, was how pleasant and discreet was she when she disagreed with me. She used pauses, facial expressions the like I'd never seen, and body language. And so the more I disagreed, the stronger they got. I mean, what do? You finally had to capitulate and do what Jane said. You know, it was just that simple. Then I'd like to, E stands for everything about her. All the things that you've heard. Her caring, smart, hard, intelligent, team player, shirt off her back, socks from Alabama. All these things, okay, really are Jane. But as I mature, you know, unfortunately, I get to go to more celebrations of life like this, and somehow that person is always receiving these endless superlatives. But in this case, for Jane, they are all true. Now let's get to V, and V will be very quick because V was really the victory. And it was the victory that the company had because of the project leader, Jane. And you also heard how she was able to handle the Japanese culture, a culture that consisted of executives, I think was anywhere from 99 to 100%. And there was Jane pounding on the table, telling them how to do it correctly. And the last thing, you know, the S for Scott is just the fact that she's just had a wonderful style. She was the perfect package. And I pray for your family, and Jeff, Matt, and all the other relatives as you go through this grieving process, because she's just a wonderful person, and it'll be impossible to get her out of your mind.
Thank you, Fred. Okay, so we just have 3 more people here. We're going to hear now from Ann James, who I think it's fair to say is Jane's closest friend.
For about 100 years. No, 46. I've probably known Jane longer than anybody but her sisters in this room. And
Can't use the microphone.
oh, does this help?
Yes.
Okay. When I was 6, I got a book, and in the book was a poem by, as it turns out, Dame Edith Sitwell. And the first lines of the poem were, "Jane, Jane, tall as a crane, the morning light creaks down again." So I guess all my life I was looking for Jane. And when I went to graduate school at Baylor, you saw a picture of 4 of us who worked with Bob Williams. And so I knew Jane. She was a year ahead of me. And then Bob Williams had a swim party, as he often did. And so this is kind of the first time we were all together. And there was a high board. And Jane walked out on that high board And I realized that Jane, with her incredible sense of presence, was standing there and turning around.